Hi.
What is up, guys? I am Rich Trippin.
And I'm Tiffany.
And it's spooky season.
Our favorite season.
It is our favorite season, not just because of the spooky, but because of the fall leaves and the apple cider and the spooky stuff. And this is something that we wanted to do for a while. We wanted to get to the bottom of it. But we don't care if we have to start at the top. And what we're talking about is the crime in the UK. And we're starting at the very tippity top of one of the most notorious killers that we plan on finding out who he is tonight. That's right, Jack the Ripper. We're going to solve that case. You guys are going to tag along. We are going to be Sherlock. You are going to be our Watson. And it's all going to be elementary. Every bit of it. It's just simple stuff that you've overlooked, and we're going to be like,
we're going to find out.
it was the queen.
We're going to figure it out.
It was the queen. She was killing hookers.
That sounds great.
All the pieces. I don't know, was it Victoria at that time?
I don't know.
It was Victoria. Victoria was just, she's slaying hookers. The video we're watching today is by Biographics. It is called Jack the Ripper, the Killer from Hell, because he was. Very few people make it across the pond over to us, but Jack the Ripper is probably every bit of common over here as he is in the UK. And it's weird, to be so notorious of a killer, to be like, not celebrated, to be so known.
Yeah.
It is weird.
Famous.
But, yeah. And this is something we like, because I'm a 40-year-old white woman, so I like murder mystery. I'm a housewife. Maybe you guys like murder mystery too. And if you guys are noticing, you guys are talking with a lot more attitude here this time, it's because of the new set, and we're farther away from the kids that are sleeping, so we can actually talk. Thank you. If you guys like this, if you guys want to help solve more cases, as we're going to do today, we're obviously going to solve this case.
100%.
Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and leave us some more murders that we should look up.
Yeah.
Notorious. We can't look into your, my aunt, we got to find him. That's all satire. We're not going to find who. We're just going to investigate. All right, let's get into the video.
Dear boss, grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Those were extracts from a letter that London's Central News Agency received on September the 27th, 1888. It was then forwarded to Scotland Yard, who were in the middle of investigating perhaps the most notorious killing spree of all time. Someone was attacking women in Whitechapel, murdering them, and then cutting up their bodies in gruesome fashion. The killer went by many names: the Whitechapel murderer, Leather Apron, Saucy Jack, and of course, Jack the Ripper. He remains unidentified to this day, so we will focus on his grim body of work, the murders, the suspects, the investigators. Few, if any, other killers in history have inspired so many studies, books, and hypotheses, courtesy of police officers, historians, writers, and crime buffs who are collectively known as Ripperologists. Yes, today on Biographics, we explore the life of Jack the Ripper. In 1888, the Whitechapel parish in the East End of London was a place rife with crime. It was an overcrowded, low-income area with terrible housing and terrible working conditions. There was a brothel on every corner and a bar next to every brothel, so the residents could indulge their vices and forget about their poverty-stricken lives. But even for such an area, nobody was prepared for what they were about to discover early one morning on August the 31st. A man named Charles Cross was on his way to his job on Bucks Row. On the way, he found a woman lying prone in the street with her skirt raised above her waist. Cross and another man named Robert Paul approached her and touched her head and hands, unable to decide if she was dead or merely unconscious. The two concluded that they should pull down her skirt and they would alert the first police officer that they encountered, but otherwise, well, they had jobs to get to. The streets of Whitechapel were poorly lit, and it was still night outside. In the darkness, even up close, neither man noticed that the woman's throat had been slit and her abdomen mutilated. A police constable named John Neal came upon the body, followed closely by Constable Meyerson, who had been alerted by Cross. A third constable went to fetch the doctor. The physician pronounced the woman dead and concluded that she had been killed about half an hour prior. This meant that the killer was likely still in the area when Charles Cross walked by. The victim was Mary Ann Nichols, a prostitute who also went by Polly. At first, her murder was linked to a few other killings, which we'll talk about a bit later. While some blamed a violent gang, the newspapers ran the story of one deranged killer preying on these women. In the weeks that followed, street gossip created the belief that the killer was a local Jewish man known as Leather Apron. Whitechapel had a large Jewish population, so resentment against them was high. Of course, the newspapers were more than happy to fuel this sensationalism. Whether it was due to frustration, incompetence, or outside pressure to do something, the police decided to arrest John Pizer in September. He was a Polish Jew who worked as a shoemaker, and some said that he was sometimes called Leather Apron. He also had a prior conviction for a stabbing attack. This was all the police had against Pizer, but fortunately for Pizer, he had a solid alibi that exculpated him. Pizer even won a libel case against a newspaper.
I gotta slow down a little bit because I'm just sitting there like I was joking about trying to solve it, but now I'm just trying to solve it. I'm trying to take everything in as a clue.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like to a point, like I'm sitting in my mind and I'm like trying to envision, because this is like that England that around the same time, like you're talking about the Christmas Carol or the Christmas Story, the Christmas Carol, like Charles Dickens and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking almost like this Victorian but industrialized England. It's heavily industrial. So you're envisioning these streets, and these streets got a smell, especially in the lower income area. And that's no broad on the British people. That's just more or less that was the times, and that idea of like people like they walk by, they see a murder, and like it makes you wonder, like during that time, was public execution still happening at that time?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, was that still a thing? So was they like normal? Like, I always wondered this, like, like if we see a dead body now, that's like, that devastates us. But like back then, did that really bother anybody?
Yeah, I wonder if it did, because
they're talking like them two people walked by. Like, I feel like if we was walking by in London right now, we seen that, we would freak out. People would be coming. People would be like, hide your eyes. But back then, was they like, oh, look, hey, she's dead. Oh, she is dead. Well, I guess we need to alert the proper authorities. If we run by one, we'll see it, but I'm rather late.
Yeah, it makes it kind of seem like they were immune to death.
Yeah. Well,
tragedy.
You don't know that. They could have been freaking out, because there's always that idea, like even here, like you have that idea of like, okay, if I came across that, would you say something? Especially because as soon as you see something, nobody else is around, no evidence. Are they just going to look at you and be like, well, you're the only one here and she's dead?
Yeah, so now all of a sudden you're a suspect.
Yeah, but they're saying that like the chances are when they came across that body, Jack the Ripper was somewhere in the shadows, watching them.
On September the 8th, the Whitechapel murderer struck again when the body of Annie Chapman was found in the backyard of Danbury Street by an elderly resident. He flagged down some passing workmen who alerted the police. Chapman's throat had a deep cut and her body had been mutilated with multiple stab wounds, immediately suggesting a connection with the murder of Mary Nichols. She had been disemboweled and her intestines had been severed, lifted out of the body and placed on her shoulder. A later post-mortem examination revealed that the killer had removed and taken Chapman's uterus. Dr. George Bagster Phillips examines the wounds and ascertains that they were caused by a very long, sharp knife with a long, thin and narrow blade. It could have been the surgical instrument that a doctor might use for a post-mortem. Phillips also said in his testimony that the murderer showed indications of anatomical knowledge. These conclusions gave birth to the idea that the killer might be someone with a medical background, a notion that is still pervasive today. The murders caused a huge sensation in London and were discussed in every newspaper in the city. Meanwhile, the police had to contend with an unexpected problem that significantly impeded their already plodding investigation. They had to look into hundreds of letters that they received from the public. Broadly, these missives could be placed into two categories: letters from people offering suggestions or information on how to catch the culprit, and letters alleged to be from the killer himself. The police received upwards of 700 letters from the public. Hundreds were purportedly from the Whitechapel murderer, either taunting or expressing remorse for his actions. That being said, there are a few which are believed by many investigators to have some merit. The first one we mentioned in the introduction to this video. It was sent to the Central News Agency almost 20 days after the murder of Annie Chapman. It starts with the words "Dear Boss" and ends with the murderer giving himself a name. From now on, he would be known as Jack the Ripper.
See, like, okay, how many movies do we know now? Like, okay, like in America, there was the Zodiac Killer, and like people sending stuff into the news and stuff like that. Like people do that, and like, did he like, that's such a terrible thing to say. Did he inspire future generations of murderers and serial killers by doing that?
Maybe.
And obviously, you know that's the actual letter because he signed it initially, "Dear Boss."
Yeah.
That's like a mental thing right there. That's like mentally unstable. That you're just like addressing the news, "Dear Boss, how you doing?" And the idea that it was like such a gruesome murder.
Yeah, like how... I feel like that was like a big thing that they should have helped them narrow it down. Like the way that they said that, it looked like it could have been somebody with a medical background. I feel like that should have helped. Because, like, how is someone going to do that? And how fast did he do that? Because I feel like that would take a long time.
Well, see, okay, like, I know this sounds bad, but, like, people are going to understand what I say. Even though that was at that part of the town, like, that was the rough part of town, the fact that it was like a prostitute kind of sheds barriers. So like if we're like, okay, this happened at like a local bar in that town, like that rough part of town, you're gonna assume, okay, it's probably somebody that like that pub, like somebody who lives in this neighborhood, that's gonna be the murderer. But if that's a street that's known for prostitution, that could be somebody from probably a 60, 70 mile radius who's just taking the train into London. You know, the idea that the act would be upon like a prostitute or something like that, they're probably not even from that area. So now you're saying, okay, he's a crazy person, should narrow it down. How many crazy people was in the city of London or surrounding areas?
I'm saying a crazy person with a medical background.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot.
Because I just feel like an average person, if they were going to do all what he done, I feel like it would take a really long time. So they would have to have a medical background to get it done that fast.
Or it could be a butcher.
True.
You know, they're like, you can do a butcher could like take care of a cow just as fast as you know, a doctor's about being careful and stuff, but a butcher would have the same.
Look at you thinking outside the box.
They needed me back then.
At first, the Dear Boss letter was dismissed as a hoax like all the others. However, one particular phrase garnered the interest of the police. When talking about his next job, Jack said that he would clip the lady's ears off. This became relevant when, just a few days later, the killer did just that. On September the 30th, 2 women fell victim to the Ripper, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. First off was Elizabeth Stride, also known as Long Liz. She was last seen around midnight in the company of an unidentified man. She was killed soon after that, and her body had already been discovered by 1 a.m. at Dutfield's yard on Burner Street. Liz died from a long 6-inch gash in her neck, but she suffered no mutilations. Because of this, some are still reticent to count her as a Ripper victim, believing that she could have been the target of an unrelated attack. However, others consider that there are enough similarities, such as location and killing method, to group her in with the other women. They believe that Jack did not cut up her body because he was either rushing to kill again or perhaps because he was interrupted. This is where a Hungarian Jew named Israel Schwartz came in with an interesting story to share which, if true, meant he might have been the interrupter. Schwartz told police that he saw a man assault a woman on Burner Street at around 12:45 a.m. that night. Believing he was witnessing a domestic spat between husband and wife, he wanted nothing to do with it and crossed the street to avoid them. He later identified Long Liz as the woman that he saw that night. His cowardice was subsequently mocked in newspapers, which labeled Schwartz a hen-hearted creature. Well, there are 2 peculiar details about his story. Firstly, Schwartz claims that there was a second man in the vicinity smoking a pipe. Secondly, the witness said that the attacker saw him and shouted something at him. Schwartz believed the word was Lipsky, an anti-Semitic slur which referenced Israel Lipsky, a Jewish man hanged for murder the year before. We don't know how serious police took Schwartz's accounts, but they did not call on him to testify at the inquest. Their records do indicate that they tracked down and eliminated the second man as a suspect. Meanwhile, within walking distance of Burner Street, Jack had found himself another victim called Catherine Kate Eddowes. After midnight, Kate was walking the streets of London after being released from jail for drunken behavior. She ended up in Mitre Square and was last seen alive at around 1:30 a.m. in the company of a man by 3 Jewish gentlemen leaving a club on Duke Street. One of those 3, Joseph Loende, got a decent look at the couple and described them, although he mainly remembered their clothes and not their features. Eddowes' body was discovered soon after by a constable walking his beat. Her neck had been cut and her body had suffered gruesome mutilations, more extensive than any of the previous victims. Her face was disfigured, her intestines were removed and placed on her shoulder, and the killer had removed her left kidney and part of her uterus. Jack had also cut off Kate's right ear, which is what convinced authorities that the Dear Boss letter was the genuine article. Now, just before we get into the other letters that the police had to deal with.
Okay, so got a couple of things. Yeah. I'm into this one.
Yeah.
So, like, first of all, I don't think that Israel Schwartz, I don't think that he actually seen Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
I think he legitimately seen a husband and wife arguing, or a boyfriend and girlfriend, because I really think about it. I don't think that he would argue with anybody.
No.
Because back during that time, like, I'm using the show with Johnny Depp from Hell as a reference, but it just looked like they'd go down a side street and do their business.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it was rough during that time. So if he was in that state and all he needed to do was get her somewhere private, her job was to go somewhere private too, because I'm sure if the police saw. So the idea that they was both after the same goal, I want to go somewhere private that no one can see us so we can fulfill that task. And he's like, I want to go somewhere private so I can tear out your uterus. So what are they going to argue over?
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is he might have seen somebody arguing, and as that time was going on, listen here, wherever that murder was taking place, he heard the arguing too, and that made him flee.
Ooh, could be.
Where it was all in that same area.
Yeah.
So he might not have witnessed nothing, but he might have witnessed what they was like. He could have been down there getting ready to do his carving and heard that argument, and he just dipped out.
Yeah.
He's like, if they come down here,
That would make sense.
That would make sense, because why would they argue? Now, it doesn't help, but another thing, he keeps chopping off different parts of people, but he seems to be really focused on the ears. That had to mean something personal to him.
Well, what could that mean personal?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, he could have been a religious fanatic, and he just very much hated the idea of like prostitution.
Yeah.
And he would be like, "You're wasting this," and like tear it out. I mean, for all we know, it could be the Archbishop of Canterbury at that time, or it could be the priest of St. Paul's or Westminster. Like, we don't know, because there's that whole Masonic aspect of watching each other, because we'll probably get to that part in the thing, but could have been tons of things. It could have been maybe him and whoever he was with, maybe he could have lost his wife, and not fair. I mean, there's a million different directions, but I'm sure as Sherlock Holmes, he would see the connection. I just need some Watsons to throw out some ideas. I am way too into this right now.
Speaking of letters, the next day, the Central News Agency received a postcard. The text said, "I was not codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow, double event, this time, number 1, squealed a bit, couldn't finish straight off. Had not time to get ears off the police, thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper." The details in the handwriting suggested to police not only that the postcard was real, but that it was written by the same person who wrote the Dear Boss letter. They published a facsimile in the hope that someone might recognize the handwriting, but they were unsuccessful. Unfortunately, while it is true that both were probably written by the same person, it is also possible that that person was not Jack the Ripper. Since the start, some investigators believed that these letters were the work of journalists, specifically either Fred Best or Thomas Bulling. They had access to confidential information and wanted to keep interest in Jack alive. Indeed, it is quite feasible that all the correspondence purported to be from Jack the Ripper was actually written by other people who wanted to be a part of the sick charade that surrounded the murders. One more letter does merit inclusion, though, because it came with a grisly accessory, part of a human kidney. This missive was addressed from hell and was sent to George Lusk, chairman of a volunteer vigilante group called the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. It read, "Mr. Lusk, Sir, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved it for you, t'other piece I fried and ate, and it was very nice.
Yeah.
I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk." The handwriting in this letter was definitely not the same as the first two. Obviously, the implication was that the kidney belonged to the fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes. Dr. Thomas Openshaw of the London Hospital examined the organ and concluded that it was indeed human. Subsequently, Openshaw received his own Ripper letter where Jack lamented that coppers spoilt the game and foiled his attempt to claim another victim near Openshaw's hospital. Jack the Ripper saved his most vicious kills for last. His victim was Mary Jane Kelly, an Irish working girl who at only 25 years old was much younger than the other murdered women. Also, unlike the rest, she was killed in her home rather than on the street. Kelly's body was discovered on the morning of November the 9th at her lodging at 13 Miller's Court by Thomas Bauer, her landlord's assistant. Bauer came round to collect the rent, and even though he was a former soldier, he was left stunned by the scene of ineffable horror that awaited him. First thing he noticed was the broken window. Inside, the room was absolutely covered in blood. On the table, he saw piles of meat, not realizing in the moment that they were human flesh. On the bed, there was the body of Kelly, which had been so grotesquely maimed and mangled that it barely looked human anymore. According to the doctor's estimation, it would have taken around 2 hours to inflict those atrocities upon Mary Kelly. It showed the world just how depraved Jack the Ripper could be when he had all the time and privacy that he wanted. Police surgeon Dr. Thomas Bond detailed the extent of her injuries in his report. The whole of the surface of the abdomen and thighs were removed, and the abdominal cavity emptied of its viscera. The breasts were cut off, the arms mutilated by several jagged wounds, and the face hacked beyond recognition of the features. The tissues of the neck were severed all round to the bone.
That was gross.
That was insane.
On the other side of the law, the London police force was engaged in one of the most ample investigations in its history. Thousands of people were interviewed and hundreds of leads were chased down, yet police were heavily criticised by the public and the media for failing to apprehend the killer. The inquiry was initially handled by Whitechapel's H Division of the Criminal Investigation Department, but was soon taken over by Scotland Yard detectives. Chief among them was Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline, who was put in charge of the case because he had previously worked for H Division for 14 years, and it was thought that his local knowledge would prove invaluable. A frequent criticism throughout the investigation concerned police refusal to offer a reward for information. Authorities were accused either of not taking the case seriously or not caring what happened in a poor district full of immigrants like Whitechapel. In reality, this lack of reward was a new Home Office policy instituted a few years earlier. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably already aware that the police never caught Jack the Ripper. That being said, there are two curious moments in their investigation that are worth discussing. First is a report by Surgeon Thomas Bond. He was asked for his opinion on the killer's medical knowledge, but Bond ended up writing an 11-point essay which is sometimes regarded as the first ever criminal profile. Curiously, Bond vehemently disagreed with Dr. Phillips' assertion that Jack the Ripper had a medical background. He didn't even think the killer had the technical knowledge of a butcher or horse slaughterer. Moreover, Bond had no doubt that the 5 women were killed by the same hand. He concluded that Jack the Ripper was cool, daring, middle-aged, quiet, respectably dressed, and inoffensive looking. He believed the killer wore a cloak or overcoat in order to conceal the bloodstains after the murders. Bond said that in each case, the mutilation was the Ripper's main goal and that Jack may have suffered from homicidal impulses brought on by satyriasis, a condition better known today as hypersexuality or nymphomania. The second moment concerns the only clue that Jack the Ripper left following a kill. After he murdered Catherine Eddowes, he took her apron. Police later found the bloody garment in a stairwell on Goulston Street. Right above it was a piece of graffiti written in chalk which read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Police saw it, copied it down, and on the orders of Police Commissioner Charles Warren, wiped it clean. At a time of sky-high racial tensions, he feared that the text might incite a violent riot. Much debate still goes on regarding whether the police acted properly by erasing possible evidence and whether the graffiti was actually a message from Jack the Ripper or just a random anti-Semitic scrawl unconnected to the crimes. The 5 dead women we have mentioned are referred to by ripperologists as the canonical 5 and are generally considered Jack's only victims. However, given the uncertainty surrounding everything else related to the Ripper, it's not surprising that people think he may have killed others. First, there were 2 slayings which took place in Whitechapel before that of Mary Nichols. The first victim was Emma Smith and the second was Martha Tabram. Smith survived her attack long enough to tell the police she was assaulted by 2 or 3 men, making it more likely that she fell prey to gang violence. Tabram, however, died after being stabbed 39 times. Her kill had the viciousness of Jack the Ripper, but investigators were ultimately convinced that her death was unrelated because her throat wasn't cut and she wasn't mutilated afterwards. Even so, it wouldn't be completely unheard of for a serial killer to evolve his modus operandi and increase in brutality as he gained more experience and more confidence. 4 more suspicious deaths occurred in 1888 and 1889, which were added to the Whitechapel murders. However, they were considered unrelated because they lacked the savage disfigurement of the Ripper. That said, one of those victims was just the torso of a woman. That certainly sounds vicious enough to be the work of Jack, but as it happened, 4 other torsos had been found around that time, just not in Whitechapel. Only one of the victims of the so-called Thames torso murders was identified as Elizabeth Jackson. Some believe these were all the work of Jack, while others feel they belonged to a second maniac who was active at the same time as the Ripper.
I gotta, first of all, that picture was just insane. I had to put that out there. I just wanted everybody to know that picture was insane. I didn't know that they had pictures from that time.
Me either.
Like when they started showing pictures, and like it's so weird because it seems so long ago, but I guess it was around the turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's so much information right there. So obviously it's not a butcher, but he said that it stopped. And that's such a weird thing because you only stop like when they have goals. Then Matt, or something? Or maybe
Yeah,
he
like,
felt
what caused him to stop?
Was there something on that last video, like that last murder, that maybe the police was a lot closer than what they thought?
Maybe.
And he was like, okay, if I do that again, or if they find that, like, I'm caught, like, I'm done.
It could be. Because why would he stop? What would be the reason to stop? If whatever his reason for doing it would be, what would cause him to actually stop? I feel like if someone's a psycho murderer who enjoys murdering people.
Yeah, you want to make it like an itch.
Yeah.
Or was he like us as a YouTube video guy, and he was just like, well, I'm gonna switch things up a little bit and see if they like it. And they're like, no, that's not Jack the Ripper. And he's like, come on, guys, it's just the new me.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to evolve with the times.
Or maybe he switched up his way of doing it to not get caught.
That's true. Maybe the murdering never stopped, but the toying with the police did.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he was like, maybe to a certain extent he came to his senses and he was like, I gotta slow down with this. Like, I gotta stop trying to maybe he lost interest in making a name. But I don't think that would be the case.
Maybe he died.
That very well could have. He could have just been some random person. He could have just left.
Well, he died.
Well, no, what I'm saying is like this right here. Like, Whitechapel, just like what he said, was just full of immigrants.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just some guy from another country, like Germany or something like that. And he was just like, okay, I've done enough. Let's get out of here.
Ooh, what if it was? And what if he went to another country and did similar things, but no one put two and two together?
Yeah, they didn't correspond like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have went to a country that just like did not care at all.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, just did not care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But who was he?
So, who was Jack the Ripper? That's the million-dollar question, and historians, scholars, criminologists, authors, and police officers have put forward over 100 suspects. Inspector Aberline strongly suspected George Chapman, a Polish immigrant and convicted serial killer who was hanged for 3 poisonings. Chapman, real name Severin Klusowski, had minor surgical knowledge and arrived in London shortly before the killing spree started. He also left for America in 1891, a few years after the murders stopped. However, Chapman used poison, and criminologists don't believe a killer would change their modus operandi to such an extent. Another convicted serial killer suspected of being Jack was Dr. Thomas Neal Cream. He was also a poisoner, and according to records, he was in prison in America during the killing spree. All available evidence should dismiss Cream as a candidate, yet he remains a popular choice solely based on the story that while being hanged, Cream's last words were
Just real quick, I thought when he said we had suspects, I thought they were just normal people, and they're like, that might be this one, and not like, oh, this one was murdering, but he does poison.
Yeah, that wouldn't.
And just something about that last picture, that guy that got arrested in America, he looked like a straight psychopath.
He did.
He looked freaky.
I am Jack. A more plausible suspect was Aaron Kosminski, a Jewish barber who emigrated from Congress, Poland sometime in the early 1880s. He was considered a strong candidate by several authorities of that era. Sir Melvin Macnaghten, Assistant Commissioner of the London Metropolitan Police, wrote in memoranda that Kosminski had strong homicidal tendencies and a great hatred of women, especially of the prostitute class. Chief Inspector Donald Swanson wrote that the only witness who got a good look at the Ripper's face, doesn't specify who, but presumably either Schwartz or Loende, refused to testify against him because they were both Jewish. And although we're not exactly sure on the date, sometime around 1890, Kosminski was committed to an insane asylum, which lines up with the murders stopping. Modern science seemingly came to the rescue when a paper published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences boldly proclaims that Aaron Kosminski was Jack the Ripper based on DNA. The authors alleged that a semen sample obtained from the shawl of Catherine Eddowes, the 4th victim, was DNA matched to a living relative of Kosminski. This study, however, was heavily criticized by other scientists who found many faults with it. Even the provenance of the shawl is in doubt. The original inventory, done in 1888, in detail lists over 30 items of clothing and possessions that Eddowes had on her at the time of the murder, yet there is no shawl among them. So while Kosminski remains one of the top suspects, the matter is yet to be settled. In the same memoranda, Assistant Commissioner McNaughton named Montague Druitt as his favourite suspect. He asserted that Druitt was sexually insane and was suspected of being the Ripper even by his own family. Druitt committed suicide a month after the murder of Mary Kelly, giving a reason why the murder stopped. McNaughton's appraisal placed Druitt at the top of the suspect list of many Ripperologists, but it seems to be based on mostly incorrect facts and hearsay. Inspector Aberline dismissed Druitt as a suspect, and decades later, researchers placed Druitt in different parts of the country for some of the murders. Going by viciousness alone, a man named Frederick Bailey Deming seemed to be the most likely culprit. Deming was hanged in Australia in 1892 for killing his second wife, only for it to be later discovered that he had also murdered his first wife and their 4 children by cutting their throats. He was certainly capable of inflicting the gruesome horrors of the Ripper, but records of his movements in 1888 are spotty at best. They seem to indicate that Deming was in South Africa at the time. These are just a few of the more sensible suspects. There are many more out there. Some believe the killings were the work of a Masonic conspiracy involving the royal family, whose goal was to protect Prince Albert Victor, and that the killer was either the prince himself or the Queen's physician, Sir William Gull. Others opine that the murderer was Lewis Carroll, author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or the post-impressionist painter Walter Sickert. Some believe that Jack the Ripper was, in fact, Jill the Ripper, and that the killer was a woman. This theory started with Inspector Aberline himself. Some of the suspects included women of the era who had been convicted of heinous murders, such as Mary Piercy and Lizzie Halliday. Now, we could keep doing this all day, and we'd definitely not run out of suspects. Ultimately, there isn't sufficient evidence to identify beyond a shadow of a doubt any person as Jack the Ripper. This anonymity surely helped bolster his infamy, as, well, here we are, 130 years after his ghastly killing spree, still talking about it. And we are hardly the only ones. Books, movies, and TV shows that revolve around the Ripper murders are still popular today. So that leaves us with just one question. Who do you think was Jack the Ripper?
Montague was the killer.
You spin to me.
Sorry. Montague was obviously the killer. Here's my thought process.
I think it makes sense.
So, like, anybody that's with a name like Montague is probably wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if somebody said, why don't you name your child Montague? I'm going to be like, because we're not rich enough.
Yeah.
But I would say during that time, because, like, I don't believe in the idea of, like, oh, Masonic this, grand conspiracy, it being the prince. I mean, it could be.
Mm-hmm.
It could be. It could be someone of royal or nobility, but I do believe, just like today's certain level, Montague was in York at that time. Montague wasn't in York at that time, but he's got enough friends and he's got enough people that he knows to say, yeah, Montague was in York at that time.
Well, if he has money, he can pay people to say that too.
That's true. That's what I'm saying. Like, connections make everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was a woman. Nothing against women. Nothing against women. But I think you're equal in the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
Convincing another woman to go down the street with you. And then, like, I feel like the woman would have some type of scars.
Mm-hmm.
So where a man, I think, would be a lot more powerful and forceful. You know, but could Jack the Ripper have held scars? I mean, you'd assume these women lived harsh lives, that they would kind of fight.
That's the thing. It's cold in the UK. If the person had scars, they could have scars and
covered it up. Yeah. I want to know who he is so bad.
I know.
I want to know who he is.
And it could have been like too, I don't know. I just feel like it's probably that one guy, because it would make sense, because they said he died, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he killed.
Because that's the thing. I don't feel like whoever was doing that would have just stopped. They had to die or leave.
Yeah,
Like-
there was something.
And if they left, there, I feel like should be a trail.
Something stopped them. But that also could have been some nobility duke who finally was like, we need to get rid of this kid. And so many people change so many things in life that like you could probably go through that time and be like, a day after that, the married so-and-so killing, Duke so-and-so's son went off to fight a war, or went off to Africa, or went off to, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different things. It could have been like not just automatically hitting it to nobility, or like this has been so romanticized that the person who did it was just so insignificant it didn't matter. Like he just got done doing what he's doing, like I said earlier, and just left.
Yeah. I don't feel so.
You
Well,
ever really left?
I feel like even if he left, I feel like there would still be like a trail of bodies somewhere.
There had to be a certain amount of
But they're not
dominance.
going to
like,
give up on doing that.
for somebody to
That's
do,
like a mental thing.
yeah.
You have to be completely mental to do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like for somebody to do something like that, there's got to be a certain amount of power that they feel like they could just take on the world. So like if he's dominating in Whitechapel, you don't think he would leave in Whitechapel because he's like, I own this. I own the cops. Nobody, I'm untouchable.
Yeah, they're going to do it till they get caught or they die.
Or somebody had a moment of clarity and was like, I got to stop before I hurt more people. And then they Montague with themselves.
No, I don't think that they would do that.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Is there any information? I know that you guys probably are a lot more connected, especially like the London. Like, I want to say to like, do you have any family members involved? But I'm not calling your grandmother a slut or anything. I'm just like,
Richard.
like obviously, like we didn't know that about the Blitz and stuff like that. How was it called? But obviously, maybe somebody who watches our videos, like, you know, my great grandfather would tell stories, or, you know, because like, what would it be? Your great grandfather?
But I can't do math like that.
Yeah. So it's like 1890. So like 1880. So like, let's say he was reasonably 20 years old by the time World War II rolled around in 1880 or 1890. So you'd be like 60. So you'd be like during World War II, you'd be hearing that from like a 60, 70-year-old man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's possible. If anybody knows, like, is there anything that they don't know? Or is this like one of them things like the rest of the world's crazy over, but we know it was this?
Oh, you know what people could know?
What?
It's like, oh, my great whatever said, you know, they lived around there, or they were visiting there and they heard rumors or stories about who it could have been.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or they could be like, you know, not all of them was prostitutes. And we know they was talking about your grandmother. I am Rich Trippin.
That's terrible.
I am Rich Trippin.
I'm Tiffany.
We didn't find out who Jack the Ripper was, but that was fun. Thank you to all our Patreons, channel members.
Ooh. Sorry.
What?
I totally switched you up.
Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, there's a Jack the Ripper tour bus thing in London, and maybe we should do it next time we go
Oh,
back.
yeah. No, next time we go to London, we're doing Jack the Ripper tour, which will be pretty soon. I am Rich Trippin.
And I'm just
I don't know who Jack the Ripper was, but that man was.